Welcome. My name is Tony Armour. I am the film commissioner here in Dallas.
My name is Andrew Vella. Some people like to call me the project specialist for the film commission.
Some people.
Some people.
Not everyone.
Not everyone, just probably Tony.
And we're really excited to have a special guest with us today. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yep. So, hey guys, my name is Alex Vanover, 23 years old, Texas native, and yeah, that's a bit about me. I fly drones.
and an amazing drone pilot. He's understating his accomplishments. I believe world champion FPV drone pilot.
Yep.
And then you have transitioned basically into film and television as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and one of your most recent projects was Ambulance.
Yeah,
with Michael Bay.
Michael Bay.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Michael Bay. Yeah, Ambulance was a really cool project for me. That was actually my first feature. So
first feature is a Michael Bay film.
Yeah, it was crazy. I think I've been working through COVID in 2020, like trying to build out this business model. Like, how can I make money doing what I love and flying drones? Because really, drones were a thing on set, but FPV, which is first person view for anyone who doesn't know, it's where you wear the goggles and you're flying the drone and the camera is fixed to the drone. So as the drone moves, the camera does. So it creates this like very creative look that you really just can't get with any other camera platform. And it's also like, you're not attached to it. So you can like fly these things through fireballs. Like at the end of the day, it's just a dollar sign to these people. So you can get some really cool shots because of that without having to use visual effects. And we got a call one day from Michael Mann, who's like Bay's like right-hand man. It's like, hey, we want you on Ambulance. Michael wants to use this technology. And so I think Ambulance was actually like my 5th or 6th day ever like on a set, like like a legit set. Like I've done projects and stuff, but like really being on something that big. So there was like 3 months of Ambulance and just like learning and taking in so much information while also like getting some amazing shots in the process. It was kind of like a crash course on cinematography, but also just like what it's like to work on something that size.
Sure, because, and I think the other thing to note about these drones is these things fly like 100 miles an hour. Yeah. Like this isn't where you're just like, you see the drone buzzes up, it hangs out, it flies a little, ooh, look, it's going kind of fast, and you get these nice smooth shots. Like you are like hauling butt because these are ones that you race with. Yeah. And so that's why Michael Bay was really interested in this type of photography because as a very kinetic, dynamic, action-oriented director, that view gives you that same kind of viewpoint of that first person, really, action kind of look.
Yeah, exactly. It really just brings the energy to the movie. So like Ambulance is all basically a car chase scene for most of the movie. These guys rob a bank, Jake Gyllenhaal, right? And I guess his brother. And they just like rob this bank, and then the entire movie is just them like running away in this ambulance. And so if you think about it, it's like what you're talking about. You have this high energy, and Michael's like, how can I bring more energy into the scene? Yeah. And so really FPV was the perfect tool for that.
That's awesome. So talk about then, getting started on that. So you're obviously a pilot and you're flying and, used to doing that kind of thing. And then you've done commercials and things like a lot of commercial work and everything, but nothing commercial work wants to elevate to the level of a Michael Bay action movie. So what are those initial conversations like when he's describing what he wants to do, and then from there, are you able to inform him, oh, well, we can do this and this, and does that then change what he wants to shoot and how it goes? That's like multiple questions, but I'll just let you.
No, that's good. I mean, so the thing with drones too is like there's really this lingo that we have as drone pilots that, obviously like a director would have with like someone on the camera department, but with drone, they don't like understand. Like with an FPV drone, one of the challenges we've faced still to this day is the camera is fixed to the drone. So when a director's like, can you just like hover and point down? It's like, well, no, we can't, because that's what a traditional drone would do. So, but what we can do is this instead. So that's like most of how the conversations went on Ambulance in the beginning was we can't do this, but we can do that. It was like try not to just tell them no, but offer something else in between. But most of the time Michael would come over, he would describe the scene and like try and describe as best as possible what is happening. And he kind of relied on me to just like take that and run with it, which was kind of a lot of pressure in the beginning because like you just saw my like history. Like I've been flying drones for 14 years now. I've come from the racing background. So you tell me to go through a 5x5 foot gate at 90 miles an hour, I'll do it hopefully 99 times out of 100 or more. So like the pressure of flying the drone wasn't really there for me, but actually trying to nail the shot, and knowing that, other people are doing their part. So it's on me the moment that drone's in the air. It was pretty stressful, but once I just like learned like, okay, this is what he's looking for. Like he's just trying to bring energy to these scenes at the end of the day. Then it just made sense for me. Like, okay, I would come up with a line, I would run it sometimes and then like show him afterwards. Like, okay, this is what I just did. What do you think? and he would maybe say, okay, make this like slide adjustment, like start more to the camera right, maybe dive in a bit more, or like bring in more speed, or that's too fast. Actually, it was actually what I got at the beginning was like the movements were too fast, because with FPV, it's like, I didn't realize this, but because every video I've ever watched is on a phone.
Right.
Yeah.
When it's on a big movie screen, those movements are really big when you think about it. And so I don't think that's something that anyone has ever experienced as an FPV pilot. I think I was like the first one to really have to think about that. Like, yes, you want to bring that energy, but you also have to make it smooth and slow enough to where as an audience member, you're like watching in a movie theater, you don't get sick watching it at the same time. So it was like a lot of challenges in the beginning. So I feel like I was one of the first guys to go through that and navigate that.
Sure, and then that's a great experience to have to take to the next project. And so I guess speaking of, being on that large format and being a feature film, for the most part, a lot of the drone flying is GoPros on these. So like, what did you use a GoPro? Like, what was the camera that you had to use? Because an FPV drone are typically small.
Yep.
So did you have to scale up the size of the drone in order to be able to hold the camera? Talk a little bit about the actual drone and camera itself.
And you also build your own drones, right? Like you're using your personal drone.
Yeah, because you can't really buy something off the shelf for what we're trying to do. Nowadays, it's a little easier. If you like want to fly a GoPro, you can go buy a drone off the shelf, like not at like a Best Buy, but like you could go online and buy something ready to fly with everything you need. But at the time, like especially for like what we're doing, they wanted to fly a cinema camera. Yeah. So like up to that point, most of the flying I ever did was with a GoPro. I started doing some stuff with the Komodo in 2020. I was working with a company called Ether Films, and they had like really good relationships with Jared at Red. And so like we were some of the early testers on the Komodo, like really putting it through its paces. The problem with cinema cameras on drones that prevented them from being on movies earlier on was that with a shutter on a camera, like you would get vibrations from the drone that would translate into the camera. Yeah. And the Komodo has a global shutter. It prevents that from happening. So it really like the Komodo was really the way that drones even evolved. But the problem was, okay, we still have like a heavy camera that we got to fly. And we got to be able to maneuver it just like we would a normal 5-inch GoPro FPV drone.
Yeah, because you don't want to be going with that thing and then just like it balance-wise with the weight of it.
Yeah,
like, you can't lift it. Two, it's flipping over or something. You take a little bank and then the thing flips over because it's top heavy because of that on there. So how did you scale that out for like size of the drone to be able to manage? And what was the weight of the Komodo? So it's the red Komodo is what we're talking about, and which is actually the camera that a lot of people are using for virtual production on LED walls as well, because for that same reason, because it has the global shutter, and so you don't get the the anti-aliasing and everything. Yep.
So for us, it was just for me really actually it was just a lot of testing because no one had really done this yet. So there were a couple people who were experimenting with it on like the drone groups, but they weren't really flying a Komodo. They were just experimenting with like flying heavier payloads. So I took a lot of what they were doing and just kind of ran with it just to get like my feet going. And during the movie, there was actually just a lot of drone testing, which like they didn't realize.
Yeah.
But like there was a lot of just testing of different drones. Like I would bring different drones on set. Most of the time, as you understand, like set work, you're there all day. Maybe you get like 1 or 2 days off a week, and I would use those 1 or 2 days and just be out testing in the field. Because I'd be on set, I'd realize like, okay, I was able to fake it. Like, and they were stoked because like they don't know any better. But like I was struggling to fly.
They should not listen to this podcast.
No, you can now because now the tech has evolved. But don't. The good I didn't say this during the filming of the movie. No, it was just a lot of testing and a lot of math, figuring out okay, the drone's 10, 15 pounds. Like, how do I get a 10-to-1 thrust to weight ratio like what I have on my GoPro FPV drones? Yeah. And so it was a lot of motor, propeller, thrust stand testing.
Oh, interesting. So you're looking at a 10-to-1 thrust to weight. And so the drone's 10 to 15, and then the camera is 10 to 15.
Well, actually, that's with the camera. It's about 10 to 15 pounds. Okay, gotcha. I forget what the camera weighs on the Komodo, but I think the Komodo is probably like the heaviest part.
Yeah, it's not a big camera, but then it depends on what lens they're putting on.
That's the key. Is like the lens. You can have a lens. I talk in grams most of the time with drones. So like you could have a lens like a like an FPV, like most of the time we're flying anywhere from like a 9 to a 21 millimeter lens. Yeah. Which we can fly tighter, but the problem when you go tighter is like the drones still like they get affected by the wind. There's no gimbal, at least on the drones we're talking about right now. You go tighter, like it's really hard to like stabilize that image without like really losing a lot of.
No, and I figured you'd be going with a wide lens like that. Because I mean, look, if you're flying a drone, you want a wide shot.
Yeah,
you don't want you're not flying a 200 millimeter telephoto. Like you want to see everything. That's the whole point of it in the first place.
Right. But some of the lenses, like going from like allow a 9 to 15 millimeter lens, that 15 millimeter lens was 600 grams heavier. Yeah. Wow. That was a significant weight difference. And like you're talking about with the center of gravity, like you have to think the camera, the designs we were flying initially, the camera's kind of on top. So like you're moving that weight on the pitch axis. So when you put a heavier camera, a heavier lens on, the drone's having to work harder to like carry that weight. So it's not as much as like I'm ever worried about it tipping over, but the motors would get like really hot.
Yeah.
The flight time would be reduced. I would be like very concerned flying it through explosions and stuff like that. But worried about it failing. And surprisingly on ambulance, we didn't have a single drone crash.
Wow.
We had, there were many times where I'm like, I don't know how that didn't just crash. And we would tell them like, hey, like we're going to fly through this explosion. We cannot guarantee that the drone comes out the other side. It's 50. And they're like, well, what are the odds? We're like 50-50. Yeah. Just because I'm blind, obviously going through an explosion. A piece of shrapnel hits the drone, it can kill it. But with those propellers spinning so fast, it would go through most of the stuff.
Yeah, it should have the momentum to just keep going. Yeah. And I would think then that because of the weight as well, it kind of has that extra mass that would keep it going if something were to happen too. Yeah. And I suppose they don't really care about the camera. Like that's why they're flying the Komodo is not whatever on a project with a budget that big is like it doesn't matter if we destroy like 6 of these. I don't know what they cost, but they're not super expensive.
$6,000 for the body.
Okay, 6.
Or Michael just says, "I'm Michael Bay. We'll get another one."
Yeah, so that was for $6,000 for a camera body, you'll just churn through those. You don't care if you destroy them.
Well, there's a funny story. So during ambulance, I actually got married to my wife Sally. So I left for 2 weeks and came back, which was like Michael's just weird. He's just like, "Oh, you're leaving to get married?" Gave me a hard time about it. I'm like, "Yes, I am, Michael." And I came back, and on the last day of like actual shooting with like cars and stunts and whatnot, Michael had this idea. He wanted to fly a drone underneath a moving car, like jump a car.
Yeah,
I think you guys have seen the shot.
Yeah, I've seen the shot. Yeah,
and but Michael had his own personal like fleet of Komodos that Red made for him. They were like the Bay. They were called like the Bay Hems or something like that.
The Bay Motos.
The Bay Motos or something like that. It is like Mayhem, Bayhem, whatever you want to call it. And it's a green Komodo. And Michael was like, let's like strap it to your drone and like fly it for like this shot. And I think Michael anticipated that the drone, because like he was determined to make me crash through that movie, which I think it was good because I gained a lot of respect from him.
Sure,
yeah,
because he doesn't care. He's like he wants to push it to the limit,
right?
Where if it goes to the limit where it crashes, then he knows where the limits are.
Exactly. And so he was like, "We're gonna fly into this car. I'm gonna jump the car one time because like no practice." I was just like destined for failure, which I think that was kind of the plan. And like he's funny. He's like filming with a smartphone. Like that's Michael. Like he's like shooting on a smartphone. It's never going to make the movie. It's just for his personal archives. And long story short, the cop car comes at me. I timed it perfectly. I flew under it with his camera on there, which like was sick. And then after I go through under the cop car, there were 2 other cop cars that was not told we're going to be there.
Right.
Because he didn't want to tell me.
He's testing
me.
He was testing me. And then if you have to think like, if you see that shot on my Instagram or even in the movie, it's in slow motion.
Right.
Because we shot in 48 frames. And so like everything's happening really fast in real time. And I see those cars. I mean, just again, we're talking heavy drone, that was a 15 mil lens. So it was a heavy lens, just full power. I mean, it's complete luck. Like obviously there's skill. Yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, like a millisecond later, I would have destroyed the drone and the camera. And after that shot, first time ever, I yelled at Michael, like in like excitement, but also like, "You didn't tell me the cop cars were going to be there." And he just walked away. And I was like, man, I wonder if I like pissed him off or whatnot. And everyone's like, no, he's just pissed off because he really thought that he was going to get you with that shot. He just like didn't want to admit it. And then later he like was like, "Good shot, kid. Maybe I'll like buy you a video game or something."
He's like, "All right, go
maybe I'll hire you again on the next one."
Yeah, maybe I'll hire you again. Yeah, working with Michael's a blast, and we've gotten to work with him a couple times since then. No features since then. Hopefully he gets like something big. Yeah. I know he does some really cool projects, but everyone kept telling me on that movie, like, "Listen, Alex, this is going to be the most fun project you ever work on, and everything's going to kind of feel like a drag after this."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What? No, there's no way." Like I'm like looking at some of these other productions, and I don't think that was necessarily true at the end of the day, but I will say like it was still like the most fun because every day you show up on set, something's going to blow up. Michael's going to yell at someone, like something crazy is going to happen, and like it made you excited to get up in the morning and go. Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
That's cool. That's awesome.
So in the beginning, when we started this episode, you dropped a couple of things. You're 23 years old.
Yep.
Your first feature is a Michael Bay film, and Michael Mann is a person that called you to work on this. How? Yeah. Like, how did you get started? You said you started 14 years ago. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that process and getting started and how you even get to work on a Michael Bay film?
Yeah, we skipped the whole first act.
Yeah, that's
true. We just went straight into act 2.
We went straight
into action. Yeah, so for me, I've always had a passion for flying. I was very thankful. My My mom was a school teacher. She saw very quickly at a young age I had a passion for flying. The way I got around most of that was because we couldn't afford to fly real airplanes, flew remote control airplanes. Yeah. I was like that nerd.
So you're 9 years old at this time?
9 years old, like technically 9, 10, because it was like Christmas at 9 when I got my first remote control airplane. I flew it immediately into a tree and broke it. Like the first flight, it was like so depressing. It's just like everything I'd ever wanted. But it was good. Like I learned, my dad and I shared those memories together a lot, and like just going out, like walking across the park in Coppell, Texas, and just like going to the elementary school and flying in the football field, and like that was for most of like my like teenage years. Like that was it. And then around 2015, I'm just sitting with my dad watching TV, and we see drone racing come on.
Oh yeah.
And at this point, I've been flying some quadcopters. Like I've been building some stuff, flying some FPV. But I'd never heard of drone racing before. Yeah. Like I know there's been some videos of guys flying through the trees and whatnot fast. And I see this video, and my dad was a billiards world champion, Bob Vanover. And I was like, I always wanted to like be a champion at something, just because I thought it was like, just like my dad was. My older brother's a tennis pro. And I saw that. I was just like, these guys are talking in the interviews. They're like, yeah, I've been flying for like 1 or 2 years. And I was like, man, like I could smoke these guys. Like if I like had the time to put into it. And so I told him like, yeah, I want to be a world champion in DRL. That was like the prestige. So from that point on, it was a lot of just working jobs that I could. My mom, both my parents really supported me. My mom worked 3 jobs just to be able to like help fund my like passion to fly drones. And in senior year of high school, I was qualified for the drone national championship. And my mom had an honest conversation with me, like, listen, after this, it's been a fun ride, but you know, like we need to focus on school and like real aviation and whatnot, which she was right about. But I was like determined, like I want to make this work. Like I want to get to DRL. And long story short, went out to Reno, Nevada and won the 2017 National Drone Racing Championship at the Reno Air Races. And that was like, the events that led to that were just crazy. And then from there, it was like, okay, I graduate high school. And then I had all these sponsors who wanted to fly me across the world to these races. And I was like making crazy money, but like I was like a dream, like, okay, I'll take a gap year from high school, go do this, and then maybe go back to college after. Filming wasn't even a part of the equation. Like no one was really doing drone filming with FPV. And so from there, I finally I get the dream call from DRL, because you had to be like 18 years old too. So I was like 17, 18. Right. So like I missed out on
they were just
season.
Waiting with you on speed dial, like ready to hit it.
Well, I got teased because I got a call from this guy named Ryan Gurry, who used to be like a pilot manager at DRL. And he was like, how old are you? And I'm like, well, I turn 18 in January. He's like, we start filming like in December. I was like, that's a bummer. Since then, they've actually lowered the age limit to I think 16 years old, which is a good thing.
That's cool,
because most of the fast guys are that age now.
So up until this point, where are you like? You're just posting on Instagram and YouTube like videos of your flying and stuff. Yeah,
and you can even go back and look at some of the OG ones. It's like I don't even really cringe looking at them because I'm proud of them. Like it's cool to see like how my flying has evolved. But yeah, I mean, most of it was just like racing through PVC gates, where like home built stuff, and then freestyle as well. So like freestyle with drones, obviously now a lot closer to what it is with filming, is just like the skateboarding of drone flying, like just like doing power loops over trees, like flips over buildings, diving down, like that. That was like all cool stuff to me. By the way, like through all this process, I didn't get my driver's license till I was 20 years old. And so it was an interesting thing because like I would want to go fly with like these like drone buddies that I met online and at these races, and like they're all like 30 years old or more. And so I'm like, hey mom, can you like take me to like downtown Dallas at like 10 p.m. at night? Like we're gonna like dive down these buildings in a sketchy part of town. Like, you can imagine how those conversations went. But like that was like good memories for me, and a lot of people even in the Dallas community who still fly like just as like a hobby, like we called themselves the Dallas Drone Stars for a while. Like it was like we hope to be like a racing team one day. Those guys really like kind of like were like mentors to me in a way, because it was like I didn't have like a lot of friends like in high school. I was kind of more like introverted. I was like focused on school and drone flying, and I did like debate, which is about the most extroverted thing I did. So for me, it was like kind of cool like having older friends just like that were mature and were doing something that I was really passionate about myself. Yeah, but that was kind of the story up till that point. And then I finally get the DRL call. So I've like raced around the world, done my thing, and all the other leagues that I could participate in. I wanted to like win in every one, and I was doing that. I get the call to DRL, and like I was the youngest pilot to ever fly in DRL at the time. I was 19, and we started our race in Miami. And everyone wanted to see like all those pilots. They knew like this was the future of the next wave, because they're 26. You know, most of these guys have I think been flying for 4 or 5 years. I've been flying for 10 years at this point.
Wow.
So I think the experience was there, and I think they all underestimated me, which surprised me because, I just won a national championship. Right. But I think they were so convinced because DRL's, the premier drone racing league, that like the pressure was going to be higher. I was going to be able to handle it. The drones we fly are different. If you've ever seen DRL, they're bigger, heavier drones. They look amazing on camera, but they require a level of precision and maturity that you don't get outside of DRL. And I came in and won my first race, just like worked as hard as I could. And I think that's really what won me the world championship, was just my dad and both my parents, really, they just drilled this work ethic into me to like work harder than everyone else, and just learn to block out what everyone else is saying about you and just focus on yourself. Like, just keep everything in your belief internal and just prove them all wrong. And that's kind of what I did in 2019. So that was like pretty much my drone racing career, and I still do drone race. But obviously since then, the priorities have shifted slightly, because my goal was to be the world champion. And I know there's some guys in other sports too, like they want to be like a 10-time world champion. Yeah. For me, like it really was just like, I just want to be the world champion, and I was content with that. So I still am competitive, but may or may not be a world champion again at drone racing, but that's okay because I'm really happy with what I'm doing.
Yeah, you're kind of transitioning into the next phase sort of thing, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So how did you then make that, it's not really a leap, but sort of that slow transition from the drone racing to then what was that first call that someone said, hey, can you film this for us?
Yeah, so ironically, it was COVID that was the blessing in disguise with all this, because I win in 2019, like November, December 2019, and then COVID hits a couple months later. And in that time, actually, there were a couple of connections I made just through local events, like local drifting events, actually, because the rage from like 2019 even to now in FPV was like the first thing anyone ever really filmed were cars. Yeah, there wasn't really cinematic drone flying. It was like drift cars are the thing to chase. GoPro did like a thing with a pilot named Johnny FPV where like he chased drift cars. And I think from like really that video, I'll give him credit. Like that, I think was the start of, okay, like drones can be like a thing that we do as a full-time job, like filming. And so COVID hits though, and I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do with my life? Am I going to like go be an airline pilot? Am I going to go back to school? Like this has been a fun ride. And then I get a DM on Instagram from a guy named Davis DeLillo out at Ether Films in El Segundo, California. And he's like, hey man, I work for this production company, and we're trying to pioneer the tech that is used on set. And I'm a drone pilot myself, but I don't have your skill level. I'm curious, like, if you would have any interest in like working with us to develop systems that would fly a cinema camera, because they saw an untapped market themselves. Yeah, sure. And so I was like, I just saw this message. I like, by the way, never check my Instagram DMs. I don't get a ton. I just like, you don't check them. And I just checked them one day. I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I flew out there in May of 2020 during COVID, and we just like sat in the office, like started working on stuff. I think they rented a couple of Aston Martins and like went out into the desert, and we just shot for a couple of days.
That's fun.
Like no one really done drone shots yet. So a lot of it was like just very basic. Like at the time it wasn't basic, but looking back now, it was like, man, it was so sick. I just chased that car from this point of view, and it was sick.
Right.
And no one had ever done that before. Yeah. Now there's so many different things that we're doing with these shots. But doing that, there was no money in that at this point. Yeah. It was just hope.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. Yeah. It makes sense that the first kind of ideas on how to get started were, okay, an FPV is fast.
Yeah.
So what's the point in doing it unless you're following something else that's fast? You're not going to follow just somebody walking or running or even riding a bike because it's not fast enough. You can do that with a regular drone. Yep. But then cars and sports cars, that makes sense that's that, that first transition.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought for a while that it was just going to be like use in cars. Like I never, even then, I don't think any of us pictured being on a movie. I think our goal was we would love to work on a movie in like 5 years.
Yeah.
I think that was our plan together. So I was thinking about like, okay, how do I sustain myself like until that point? Because obviously we knew the money was in movies, and some of the guys on our crew, they've been working in film through just cameras and stuff for a decade at this point, even traditional drone work. And so we started doing all these spec projects, like these free projects, and we would just post them on social media. We would they would send them to clients that they knew. And then a couple of commercials started giving us calls like, hey, like we have a Nissan commercial out in the desert. We want some of those drone shots. So we would go out there and we would like bring our van out. I'd fly out to LA from Dallas and, be out there for a couple of days. We'd shoot this commercial. And like for me, I was excited because I was making money at this point doing this, like paying the bills. I was like, this is sick. I'm like doing something with this, Mom. And
if you're listening,
I was able to move out of the house too.
Mom, I'm not a loser.
I'm not
I have a job.
Yeah, exactly. And to her credit, they believed in me. Like the moment I won that national championship, the support was all there, and it was just like being real. They encouraged me to be realistic, but also like to be passionate about what I do, and I'm very thankful for that. And so all these commercials start coming in, and it actually wasn't me directly who got the call, but it was our company we did this. I'll back up. We did this one spec in particular for Ducati. I don't know if you've seen the shot that I did. It was diving off a building in LA at night into Lower Grand, which is like diving from midair to like underground through about a 10-foot wide gap, which 10 foot wide for a drone that's, this big doesn't seem that bad. But when you're coming in at 90 miles an hour and it's like pitch black, and you have to remember like what we see in the goggles is not as good a quality as what you see on the red.
Right.
So we do that because we need low latency. And so that was like that one shot. The pilot who was supposed to do it, his name was Johnny FPV, which some of you guys who follow drones will know. He was like the big name, and he still is a big name. And he was sick, so he couldn't do the project. And so I got
sick in a bad way, not sick in a good way.
Right, exactly. Sick and poor guy had COVID. But it actually kind of lit a fire under my belly because I was working with this production company, and they wanted to use him on the shot, even though we had been working together. But it was because like they were like, we want to make sure like this is the guy who's actually doing projects right now, the only guy who's getting consistent commercial work. Like we want to use him on this because I think they still thought he was like the best pilot. I think they still like, even after all those projects, like there was a little less faith in me that there wasn't him. Right. Which lit a fire under my belly because like with all due respect, I just felt like I was the better pilot because I'd been flying longer, and I was like, I just needed the chance to prove it on something like, because to my knowledge, like all the stuff that I was doing was not very difficult. I needed something like that shot that was going to be like, wow, this is so difficult, and to execute it well. So we do this dive and we come on a motorcycle. We got it second try. We actually got it the first try, but the timing was like, could have been better. So we got it within 2 tries. And to the point where like we had this shot slated out till 12 a.m. at night, and we were done by 10. It was which is like, that's a win if you're on set.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Like when they're saving them time and money. Absolutely. And that one shot, I remember like people at ETH, they were coming up to me and they were just wowed, and they're like, that shot's going to make your career. Wow. And of course, like to me, like then nothing happened for like a couple months. I was like, okay, maybe. Like I believe it. It's a sick shot. And then I get a phone call from Davis DeLillo.
Sick in a good way, not sick in a bad way.
Sick in a good way. That's true. Good clarification. I get a phone call, and Davis DeLillo is freaking out. He's like, I remember I was in my apartment, got the call, and he's like, dude, we are going to be on a Michael Bay movie. And I actually forgot for a second who Michael Bay was. Like, I knew the name, but I was like, Michael Bay, like Transformers Michael Bay? I was like, oh my gosh, I thought we were doing like Transformers, but it was Ambulance. Yeah. And so that's, obviously we told that story. We skipped through to Act 2, but that is what led up to that. Right. So it's just a lot of events happening that led up to that. And it's super exciting to like talk about it and look back because, it worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of looking back on your career, what are some of like those early skills that you learned or would pass on to like someone trying to fly a drone or just get to where you are right now?
Yeah, I would encourage people to like pursue making their own content, even if they're not making money doing it. Like there's so many ways that I could have been using like, and some of the things I did do, like, like I would, talk to my friends and be like, hey, you got like a Mustang. That's cool. Like, can I like pay you like $20 like or buy your dinner? Let's like go find a road out in like Justin, Texas or something, and like let me just chase Mustang.
Will you record it,
bro? After this, and like
just doing donuts in the parking lot.
Are you good at drifting?
No, I'm not. But you can make me look like I'm drifting.
That's true. I'll make you look sick. Just shooting 24 frames, shutter speeds. Yeah,
I'll just do slow circles in the parking lot.
There we go. I'll just like speed ramp, make you look sick. And so that'd be like my biggest tip to people is like, just find ways, like if you don't have to live anywhere super cool to like get cool content. If you live near mountains or something, even better, like go like fly through mountains, post on Instagram. Like you're not only like potentially like attracting people to work with, but you're also just like becoming a better pilot yourself, like flying in those situations. And just like go make content's the biggest thing. And I think beyond that, I come from racing, and I feel like the best pilots like Johnny FPV, myself, we come from a racing background as well. Like he raced in DRL for 1 or 2 years, and being able to like not only fly a drone at that speed, that precisely over and over again, but also being able to handle that pressure. Yeah. Like that's something that I think that a lot of people who I see get into the filming side of things with FPV, like there's some great pilots, but they don't perform to the level that I've seen them fly outside of like set when they're on set. And I think it's a pressure thing because they don't come from race. They don't know like how to deal with that.
Yeah, because it's like, all right, you have one take or you get 2 takes or whatever it is, and the entire crew is watching, waiting for you not to screw up. I mean, it's like being an athlete basically. Like
exactly,
you have to practice to hone the skills, but then you have to be in competition to really have that. And I suppose a lot of could be the reaction as well, because like if you're racing, you're reacting as you're moving through the course and everything. And so in the course of shooting something, it really is not just action but reaction. And so you have to train the reaction skills as well as just the the repetitiveness of action.
So yeah, exactly. So my 2 tips would, I guess to sum up, would be like go out there, make content. Freestyling is another. I'll add that as like a third one, I suppose. Like going out, just like learning how to fly your drone and like upside down and like really comfortably. You can watch drone videos online and like go replicate that stuff. There's plenty of places to go fly where you won't bother anyone. You don't have to like go fly downtown, which I wouldn't recommend without permits.
And it's
also illegal
without permits.
It was not like this years ago, but now it is, which is a good thing. And then I would encourage people to find a local drone racing chapter if they really are pursuing film. I think doing a little bit of racing will really help. You don't have to build like a racing drone specifically. Just going out and learning how to fly through 5x5 foot PVC gates over and over and over again without crashing. I think people don't realize, and I've seen people who they end up taking my advice. They just go to like a local race wherever they're living. They're like, this is silly. I finished 13th out of 20th, right? My goal is to be a film pilot. But they like learn to fly those courses consistently. And then when they show up on set and they ask them to fly through a 10-foot gap, they're like, I can do that. I'm not worried about it because I've been flying through 5x5 foot gates way faster.
Sure. Yeah. And so literally the advice is practice.
Yes. That's it. Yeah. That's actually
it's really pretty simple when you boil it down. Yeah.
Practice. Well, what about music videos? Because you've shot 2 music videos for Justin Bieber, right?
Yep.
So I imagine if you're flying a drone next to someone like Justin Bieber, there's like you're just thinking about safety as well, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or he's not.
Or you're not, because you don't need to, right?
What if I knock Justin Bieber out with this drone?
Yeah, that would be a good way to end my career. I'd probably end any drone career for people too. Just in the laws that would get changed if I were to hit a talent or someone else was. When you're flying around him, there's like precautions that we take both on the gear side of things as well as from the flying side of things. So one of the things that we do is we put guards around the propellers of the drones. So they're like, it makes the drones perform worse because you have like wind sails basically around your drone. So it slows it down and makes it less efficient, a little more noisy too. But the benefit is like if I hit him, like it's not going to hurt him at all. It's not going to cut him. Like that's the best part. I'll just like bounce off like a bumper car. It's not fun to fly, but it's one of those precautions we take when we fly around any type of talent, whether it's a GoPro drone or whether it's a Cinelifter, as we would call it, to fly a cinema drone. So that's one of the precautions. And besides that, it's just a lot of planning. Like we talked through the shot, like on some of these commercials and even like I was talking about ambulance in this podcast, like sometimes it's just like free reign to basically do what we want. Like this is what we're trying to capture. You do that the best way possible. But when you're flying around talent, diving on them, like on that Justin Bieber music video, Stay with him and Kid Laroi, like obviously they're moving through the scene. So like I made sure to like walk with them and tell them like, hey, this is where the drone is going to be and not vary from that. So that way they know what to expect as well, because like up to that point, I don't believe either one of them had worked with any types of drones. So you imagine you have this flying machine coming at you and it's loud, it's scary.
Yeah.
You guys have seen me fly my GoPro drone, but like these Cinelifters, like they're not necessarily louder, but they have like a deeper roar to them. You realize like when you pick it up, like how much power that drone has to have in order to lift this camera. Like you do not want that flying into you.
Yeah.
Regardless of if it has guards on it or not. And so a lot of it too is like when I show up with new talent, I will build that trust up. So I won't start off super, super close. And I explain that to the director or the AD, whoever it might be. Like, hey, I'm going to start off a little bit back just so that way they can get comfortable with the drone being around them. Because there are actors in Hollywood who they literally will not work on a project. And it's unfortunate because they've like heard of like a drone incident or something like that. And so they will not work around drones. They're just like out, and it doesn't matter if it's got guards and they're like, nope, won't do it. Will not work. I will not work if it's like they're striking against drones.
Drone strike. Well, wait, that's be taken 2 different ways there.
That could be
drone strike. We are not advocating.
We are not advocating for drone strikes. Please don't. Drones are very safe, and if anyone's out there looking for drone pilots, all I would say is that you just want to find someone who's qualified, who has a resume, and make sure that they are prepared. I talk through those situations as well. I actually love it when clients do that with me.
Yeah. So so a lot of car commercials, music videos,
a Doritos commercial, right?
Doritos. Okay, commercial. Because that's what I was going to ask. What besides cars, music videos, and Michael Bay, like, you know, what other things are brands or commercials or feature films getting creative with that they want, you know, FPV footage?
I think two ones that popped to my mind. I'll say three. One of them would be a Doritos commercial, and it was funny because we were flying the drone like around the kids. The scene is like they're playing soccer and eating Doritos, and so like just doing some like high and wide stuff, like very typical drone stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's a shot where like kid kicks the ball, and then it cuts to like a 1.5 second shot of like the drone is like the ball POV.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Like you could never do that with a camera fast now.
Yeah.
So I literally flew the drone into the soccer net.
Yeah. Well, and you know, the fun thing about this as well is you can do all this like in camera. You're not having to create it in animation and post-production and special effects. You can see what it looks like when you're doing it and knowing if it and know if it works or not. And that's the more you think about it, it's like sports stuff, like it makes a lot of sense. You know, somebody throws a football and you just chase the football. You know, kind of thing. I don't know if you've done that yet, but
I've done some chasing of the football.
Yeah, I mean that seems like it makes sense. Anything where, you know, I can imagine you can start getting really creative with a variety of different types of shoots.
Yeah, I've done like golf ball chasing. I've done football chasing. Another one that pops to my mind is Chipotle. Like you think like we're dealing with a drone like in guacamole.
They're throwing burritos.
They're throwing burritos and the drone is slicing through them. You know? So there was it was actually with Chipotle and the NHL that I did a project earlier this year, and it was like 3 different specs that we shot like in a 1.5 week tour around the United States. And it was like more typical drone shots. Like in this case, it was hockey players. So it's like a 15-second one take that's only drone. And then at the end, it's like 1 second of them just like, you know, eating Chipotle on a handheld gimbal. But it was cool. Like it's like they're like doing the voiceover and they're like talking about like what they would have in their like burrito bowl or something like that. And I'm like flying around them as they're like kicking the soccer ball around, kicking it into the net. And it's just like cool. So like I think the point of that is like just to show like even with a client like Chipotle, like you can still do something cool, creative with the drone. I want to fly through like some guacamole or something.
A burrito explosion.
A burrito explosion. Yeah, just like flying through burritos. And then I think the final one, it was a movie, but it was very different because it was Emancipation with Will Smith.
Yeah.
And what was crazy about Emancipation was you have to put yourself in my shoes. You just came off of a Michael Bay movie and then Justin Bieber music video. So all these things are very high action FPV.
Yeah.
I get there on Emancipation, and we're in the swamps. And in Louisiana, it's like hot, it's sticky. I'm like, man, this doesn't look like a set that's like going to have this high energy FPV. And Bob Richardson was the DP on that. And Bob made it very, very clear he does not like drones. He was anti-drone. He goes, listen, if I can have it my way, for a shot, I'm going to have my men cut down all these trees, lay the tracks out, and they're going to get it first try. You know, like that was his style. He's a cinematographer. He's a purist.
Cinematographer.
He's a purist. These drones, no, thank you. And during that movie, it was like I would do some fly-through shots and very, very slow, like keeping the drone as level as possible. And I would do the shot, and most people were pretty stoked, including myself. Like, man, that was sick. It's like so much different than like chasing a car. Like we're flying through this scene, and then Bob came up to me after the first shot. He's like, I'll tell you when the shot's good. And I was like, that was like. It wasn't depressing, but it was like a wake-up call for me because I've basically had people my entire drone career at this point just gassing me up and like telling me how good my shots are. And so, but that was like, I loved that challenge as well. But what we realized, and to add to that, was the drone platform we had, you can't fly a traditional drone because it's too big. It won't fit in the spaces that they needed to fly, like through the trees, near talent. But you couldn't fly an FPV drone because they didn't want any of this camera movement.
Right.
So we were like, what do we do? Like they can't put the camera out over the swamps, which is why they couldn't lay the tracks out.
Yeah.
So we did gimbal at FPV. We literally like took a Ronin gimbal and an RS3, and we just like built a drone.
You hang that below then. Because so then for a platform, when you're launching that, it's obviously not launching flat off the ground. You've got to have like almost pedestals on each side, and it's on the pedestals. You hook it underneath, and then you lift.
Or you just take it like we built like landing gear for the RS3 and the Ronin, for example, to be able to just be able to take it off. So you don't have to like. There were some sketchy initial flights though.
That's a big drone to be able to.
Yes, it is.
That's heavy.
You're talking about sometimes up to a 40, 50-pound drone.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's FPV. So it's not like these traditional drones that are 55 pounds, but they have GPS.
Right.
Like this is 100% acro, which means no stabilization. And we brought that onto set midway through the movie. And actually, I'll give credit to another pilot at Lightcraft who worked on that. His name's Jordan Temkin, and he actually really was like one of the guys who was like passionate already about this idea. And that movie was like the perfect instance to really bring it to light. And that made Bob super happy because we could put the drone in areas where they couldn't put their cameras, but we were able to move the camera like it was at the speed of an FPV drone without the look of it being FPV.
Right.
So it's a two-man operation. So you have one guy doing the gimbal and doing the camera, and it's one guy pulling focus and then another pilot flying the drone.
Yeah.
It created a different workflow. As the pilot, I can't see what that camera is seeing. Mm-hmm. So it took a lot of communication back and forth. Like, okay, drone left, camera move, like right, pan, like down, push up. So we had to like figure this all out on the fly.
Yeah.
But coming from like ambulance to that, I mean, that is like the biggest stark difference that I think there could be. It's like working on something that's like truly cinema.
Sure. Well, and it's interesting then because you're so young in your career when it comes to the feature film side of things, and you're just learning because your background was not in film or cinematography or anything at all. And so each time you do something, you're going to learn a little bit more and be able to apply that to the next project, then next, and probably building new and different drones because so-and-so wants this type of shot or whatever else it might be.
Yeah, exactly. It was just a lot of learning, constant learning.
So when you get a call to work on a Michael Bay film, I imagine when you hear his name, you're like, yeah, I'll do it. I don't care what it is, right? But like for something like Emancipation, what do those early conversations look like? Mm-hmm. Like, what did they tell you about the movie? Did they tell you what did those early meetings look like for you?
Yeah, so oftentimes it's with the client calls, it's they won't tell us everything, but they'll just tell us like, we're filming in the swamps and we're going to be like, these are the shots that we're kind of looking for. Like in Emancipation, it was a mixture of like flying through like the first scene of the movie, which they shot for about a month. It took them like, I think Emancipation, because there was also a hurricane. Yeah. So it took them like 7-8 months to film that movie. It probably would have taken them 6 or 5, but it took them a lot longer. Like the hurricane like destroyed the set. It's like, if you imagine it's like a Civil War set. So like it's not supposed to be robust.
Right.
And so a lot of the shots were like flying through the scene, like kind of capturing the feel of like, this is like establishing shots. And the other half are like the slaves, they're running away. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it was like those action moments, kind of similar to what we would do with FPV, but with a gimbal look so that you don't get like this whole thing. And so those early conversations, because it was something new to us, they were like, felt like a bit vague because we knew what they were wanting, but we didn't realize that they didn't want the non-FPV look. And I don't think they exactly realized it either. And you have to imagine like the DP ultimately has so much control over that when it's on set. So like we're not on the call with Bob Richardson necessarily. We're just on the call with like, sometimes it's the director or sometimes it's an executive producer or something like that. So then we get there and then we realize, oh man, like we don't really have the tool that they actually want. Like, and again, this is part of the translation and learning, trying to like educate people on FPV, and why I like doing stuff like this too, is people don't realize like what these FPV drones can and can't do.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So like, this has been a challenge for the last couple of years, is trying to educate people. So that way, first off, like I don't want someone to hire me if like I'm not the person for the job. But at the same time, like now with the drones, they've evolved so much where, okay, like I can bring a different drone for a different job. Whereas like before it's like an FPV drone. Now we have an FPV drone with a gimbal. So like really like depending on what the client wants.
So yeah, because you've built some of these from scratch. So it's like now you build it, you don't get rid of it. It's like you've got it. It's like, all right, we got this for the next one, and you know can tweak those and modify them or do different ones. And it's very cool to know that this is still so brand new and really just evolving as it goes.
Yeah, it's continually evolving, and my goal with the drones is to try and obviously continue to evolve them. Like I think a big limiting factor right now is the flight time. Like traditional drones will fly for 10 to 20 minutes or more. Our FPV drones will fly for anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes.
Oh yeah.
So like if you think about a set, like when I try and make it very clear to ADs, like the drone needs to be the last thing that takes off, because I can get to my camera 1 position really fast. Yeah. Like I can get there and like this.
Yeah.
But I can't be just sitting there for 5 minutes while like you make some changes.
Right.
And that's happened a couple times.
Right.
It sucks when it happens, like especially on a movie, where like I'm sitting there waiting, and I'm like, they're like ready to roll finally, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I gotta land. Like if you want the drone in the shot, like I gotta change the battery, and thankfully that's about a 2-minute process.
Right.
It's not too long, but like it's just part of the workflow.
Yeah.
So trying to educate, like that's like the biggest limiting factor on drones. I think as the battery tech improves, drones get more efficient as well. That will get better, but it's not gonna be an overnight change. So like that's something that we're gonna have to deal with for probably the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, that makes sense. I imagine you just have like a stack of batteries basically that you just go through and keep continually charging throughout the day.
Yeah, exactly. And so generally we bring enough batteries to be able to fly for, I would say like an hour and a half continuously, which that's like back to back to back. Like, there's very few times where we're ever doing that. One of the times was on Gran Turismo, which I filmed last year because we're on a racetrack. And so there's like, multiple different teams out on the track. So really we're just like tasked, like, here's your shot list for the day. Like we want shots of this car, frontal shots, panning, side shots, et cetera, et cetera. And so we'd be out there and they're running the cars like continuously all day. So like we were struggling. It was cold too, so the batteries were performing even worse in the cold weather. Like we were getting 90 seconds of flight time at 100 miles an hour, which is kind of crazy to think about with a gimbal, 100 miles an hour. But we were just, that was one of those instances. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. As you have longer shots that are needed, like nobody's going to do a, Goodfellas style super long oneer that's like 10 minutes long. You can't have that because the battery won't last that long. You literally have to have 2 drones flying, one that's going and then the one that like lifts and takes like as in stages or something. If you were gonna shoot something like that,
there's ways to cheat it as well. Like one takes are another thing we didn't talk too much about. I feel like that's like one of the other ways that drones are used, where like they'll fly through a restaurant or like a bowling alley or something like that, and you get this awesome perspective, especially when you like get someone who's good at editing and they can like put good sound effects in there and like do good color grading
through windows.
And most of that stuff is GoPro FPV, which annoys me because like ironically, like I've become like really a fan of like even the Komodo to me. Like that's like on a big set, the Komodo is like a GoPro to them.
Right.
They're like, can you fly like an Alexa Mini? It's like, well, we can, but it's not worth it. Like you have to explain that conversation with them. But yeah, with those GoPro fly-throughs, they're a lot of fun and they're their own challenge in its own way as well. But everything is like a different tool for every job as well. And most of the stuff I do, I would say, is like on the feature side of things, movie features, car commercials, stuff like that. But I'm trying to keep into the feature side of things as much as possible.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I guess you maybe don't really know what's coming next because waiting for the SAG strike to get over, WGA is over. But I assume you're fielding calls, like there's interest as stuff is coming down the line.
Yeah, there's a couple projects that I'm working on at the moment. I'm not sure if I can say, so I'm not going to, but we'll talk about it afterwards. But yeah, there's a couple of projects I was working on before the strike happened that still have a couple weeks of filming to resume. So I'm really excited for the strike to end because I've been in talks with like my production coordinators who are like, like these are the dates we're looking at, assuming the strike were to end.
Right.
And then there's even more talks about future projects. I think though, I think it's not going to be an immediate total light switch. I think that these projects are going to finish, and I think it'll still be a little bit slow.
Yeah, there's going to be a gap because we're closing in on the holidays now.
Yeah, exactly.
And nothing will start up till January, essentially.
Yeah, January or February.
Yeah.
But I think that the positive through all this has been like the commercial side of things has started to come back as well. And there's been like other projects, like some stuff I've been doing here with you guys in Dallas as well, trying to pave a pathway there as well. So it's like kind of opened up doors that I wouldn't have like thought about even going through if it wasn't for like all these features kind of like coming to an abrupt halt. I mean, to be honest, once Ambulance hit, it was like kind of back to back to back.
Yeah.
And I think I was naive. I just was like, I didn't realize it was kind of like a little bit of a bubble. Like obviously there's going to be features, but like we were really in like a big, like every project is happening right now. I was just like, man, it's never going to end. This is awesome.
That's the thing you need to learn about the industry is like take it while you can and like make as much money as you can on that, because then you might go a year with nothing.
Exactly.
You just don't know how it's, how things are going to play out.
Yeah, exactly. That's been a fun learning experience, especially living in California now. It's very expensive to live there.
You're like, wait a minute, Dallas cost of living, LA cost of living.
Yeah. I thought an apartment in Grapevine was expensive. Oh man, I had no idea. Like I look with my wife at like home prices and whatnot here. I'm like, man, like I can't wait to get back.
Like let's just buy the house in Dallas and we'll commute to LA.
And potentially, we'll see.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Well, awesome. Alex, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Hey guys.
Andrew, any final questions
Do you have anything you'd like our listeners to close out with or hear from you?
Yeah, bring some drone work to Dallas. That'd be sick. No, I mean, it was like fun talking with you guys, and like hopefully this was also educational for anyone like DPs or directors, clients listening. Hopefully like you learn some stuff about like the drone things that I do, the different platforms and whatnot. And I think it's really exciting too. Like obviously Texas is my home, so it's like good chatting with you guys. Being back here in Dallas, it just always will feel like home to me.
No, it's good having you on, and I learned something today too.
Love that. That's great, guys.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.